Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, viewers. I'm Matthias Aufiku, news editor of the Namibian Sun newspaper. Welcome to another exciting edition of the Evening Review Show. Today's show will touch on topical matters such as the NEEEF issue that's been making headlines. But before we get to that, let's first have a look at today's headlines. Well, we're joined in studio tonight by Mr. Eben De Klerk. He calls himself a futurist. Yeah? Eben,
yes,
welcome.
Recently. Thank you very much, Matthias.
So you changed from being a lawyer to a futurist.
Yeah, some stuff in between as well. Yeah. Yeah.
So what does a futurist do?
Well, it's about forecasting. It's about the methodologies of understanding what's on the horizon and what might become our reality in future, more likely or less likely our reality in future, and then start to plan along those routes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a few years back, especially with the surfacing of the debate around economic transformation, the national empowerment framework, at least to say for that, you were one of those who really voiced your concern around this policy, as to say, national equitable economic empowerment framework, is this the way to go to ensure transformation and fight inequality in Namibia? What is your position? Have you changed, or is it still the same?
Well, I've become a bit wise about the position is still the same, yes. Yeah, so that started in 2016 when February government dropped a bill and gave the public 2 weeks to give comments. And up to that point, the framework that was existing for quite a long time before that was in existence, and it didn't bother many people. And then when the bill came up, it was substantially a different animal than was discussed previously at cabinet level and so forth. So the bill was not close to what the framework was. And most prominent problem that we had with the bill was that it moved from an incentivized economic equitable empowerment concept to a mandatory one, which brought in a lot of penalties and if you don't comply and so forth. And then it became really a big problem because one could immediately see that if this progresses, then we're gonna be killing investments in our country. And now 5 years down the line, we have the evidence of that.
Yeah. In terms of analysis, you call yourself a futurist. What is the way to go as far as economic transformation is concerned? Whether there are shortcomings with the bill, but somehow it needs to certainly to be ironed out in a way that's beneficial to all parties involved.
Yeah, and we provided a report. When I say we, the Economic Policy Research Association provided a report on a previous draft, and we amended our report slightly with the latest known draft from November 2020 to edge out and to explain some of the shortcomings, both on an economic level, on a legal level, and also in terms of what we can expect the future to hold. Okay, so the problem that we're sitting with is inequality and the distribution of income and wealth in our country between our races is not acceptable at this stage. And that is accepted by us fully. The question is, how do we deal with that? And that's also the question that the president asks. You know, if the document is not suitable for investors and for many others, what are the solutions? And the answer is actually quite simple. The recipe has been written for hundreds and hundreds of years. Economic models have been tried and tested and theorized on for hundreds of years. And we're not unique in Namibia in terms of an unequal society. We're not unique in terms of trying to put in mechanisms to make the distribution of wealth more equitable.
Yeah.
The problem is that recipe also had a recipe for disaster next to it. You can also follow a recipe that has so many times in other countries failed. And so we must do something about the problem, but to deal with the problem in a way that actually causes more harm, substantially more harm than it can bring any benefit, should logically not be the way to go forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we provide the solutions, and we every time hear the message, but what's the solution? And we say, well, it's been well documented in thousands, millions of research reports, if somebody would be interested to follow that.
Yeah. Well, at the household level, especially those that really bear the brunt of inequality and poverty, they would be saying, but these leaders, these educated people in this country, academics, they are fighting at a macro level. But here, down here, we are the ones feeling the pinch as this drags on.
For sure. So what do they need? They need jobs. They need an income. They need a means to have a decent life. That is very nicely described in Vision 2030.
Yeah.
And everybody wants, all Namibians, to have that. Achieving that is the difficulty. So by killing jobs, by killing the economy, by killing the means of income, by chasing investors away, firstly we must say, well, that's definitely not going to solve the problem. So what is going to solve the problem? And that is the part that I say that's been well documented and researched. You need two legs. You need human development, and Namibia is not very good at our on the human development ranking in the world, and that basically has underneath it healthcare, access to safety, which means housing, personal safety, and so forth, and quality education. And with due respect, our government is failing badly on all three of those. And then you need economic development, because if you've given a person education and you've given him the basics of life, then you want to give him a job to look after himself. And for that, the economy must grow. Now the economy is not growing, so there is nowhere that they can go to find more and more jobs and for their children and their children's children.
So what is the mutually beneficial solution that benefits both those who need to be uplifted and the investors on the other side?
There's no quick fix. We must first accept that there is no quick fix. If those two pillars don't grow, if we don't have responsible investment in human development, and make sure that our education is on standard, you know where we are in terms of educational standards, you know where we are in terms of public health care, and you know where we are with housing. If we don't gradually grow that and invest in that, we don't have people that can be taken up by an economy. You sit with an economy that only in public sector can people find a job, and ultimately that, like they say in socialism, you run out of other people's money, you run out of the money to feed people into public sector space. We've seen what happens then eventually. And then you have to create an enabling environment. You have to create an environment where investors say, I want to go there. That looks attractive to me. That country is a democratic country. It operates on the principles of the rule of law, and my investment will be safe there. I will not be forced to alienate what I've worked for and my financial investment. I can transfer my money. It's an open economy. It's an attractive place. We do exactly the opposite. We tell an investor, we will be very hard on your importing skills, which you can't find here. Your investment can be expropriated for any public good. You will find it extremely difficult to expatriate your profits. And by the way, we don't abide by the rule of law, because the rule of law, one of the main pillars is that we treat people equally. And by this message, we're not going to treat people equally. So thank you very much. I see the direction you are going in. I'm not interested. So the investor walks away, and the person, the poor people, literally poor people, that could benefit from this, don't find a benefit, but the politicians keep on screaming, but they must benefit. They can't if we chase investors away. So we must create the enabling environment, and that's going to take time. It shouldn't be a populist thing, because populist policies brings you votes in the short term, and you cannot deliver in the medium and long term, and then you ramp up populist policies because you don't want to lose the votes. Ultimately, the people suffer for that.
Yeah, but then over the years, and of course that bill has been withdrawn, the 25%, but I'm just using it as a...
It hasn't been withdrawn. It hasn't been withdrawn. That's a very unfortunate misperception of what the president said. The previous version said that there must be 25% minimum previously disadvantaged Namibian ownership in all Namibian businesses. The ownership pillar stands, and all it says now is not a fixed 25% or to be increased at the discretion of a minister or this entity. It is just now open. It can, in terms of this document, be 25%, but it can also be 50, 75 or 100%.
So is the discretion you have a problem with?
It's not about the discretion. It is the fact that that certain individuals will not be allowed to outright own businesses. Okay? And that will also be applicable to investors in Namibia, because they're not previously disadvantaged. So if you come into Namibia and you would have spent $1 million on a business that's worth spending $1 million on, this bill says, okay, that business is going to cost you $1 million, but by the way, you have to give 25 or 50 or 75% away. That can change any time. So you might come in at 10%, but in a year we feel, but not enough people has benefited, we're going to make it 75%. So you have no idea what additional cost, and it is an additional cost, because there's no mechanism to bring value for that additional cost into this business. You sit with this uncertainty perpetually after this thing has been passed, but you sit with an additional cost, whether it be 1% or 99% or 100%, you have to invest more. So why would I go to a country where I have to invest more than it would cost me to put the business up? So, and there's many countries that don't expect that from me, so I'd rather go there.
So then, where do you draw the line between government's role to provide for its citizens and also at the same time to ensure that there's an enabled environment for investors to come?
How does government provide for its citizens? How does the government provide for its citizens?
By ensuring that the legislation in place is advantageous to the citizens.
Yeah, but the legislation is just a document. If I need to provide for the citizens, I must have an income. I must receive something to give it out. Government only deals with public funds. Government only redistributes public funds. It doesn't provide. It cannot provide. Government is just a few individuals that has been elected through a ballot. Those individuals cannot do anything except put laws in place if they don't have sufficient tax to actually pay for the hospital that is required for the human development, to pay for the schools. And the moment that you kill that goose that provides those taxes, government has a continuously lesser ability to redistribute that income. And we again have seen this the past 5 years. So while we argue about empowerment, we have seen the massive conundrum that government now sits with in terms of just paying for the basic expenses. It now has to make an extremely difficult decision, and it's made the decision, but it's not following through, but have to go through the process of reducing the public wage bill because it doesn't get that income anymore. So apart from private sector, let's say private sector is completely out of the equation. Government is shooting itself in the foot in terms of being able to, let's call it then provide, to redistribute income. So if government is serious about providing for the people, it must focus on the human development side, and that can only be done if the finances are sufficient, if private sector operates, and you cannot have a private sector grow if you don't put the enabling environment in place. If you tell private sector, you guys are too rich, we will now take from you and give to somebody else, because it's a coercive redistributive policy.
Yeah.
And coercive redistributive policies hasn't worked anywhere in the world. It hasn't. People say it has worked in Malaysia. They haven't read the reports after that. It hasn't worked there. It hasn't worked in Venezuela, and even in China, that has now decided that people shouldn't become that rich. Jack Ma has arguably not been legitimately seen since October last year, and government decided to take more control of Alibaba. Alibaba's got 2 million suppliers, 250,000 employees. Its share price plummeted. So who benefited from that? Will the Chinese government be able to provide more to the people by actively encroaching in the private sector business that they've allowed to grow and don't like that kind of power that they've kind of gained? They don't like people becoming too rich. You don't have to like rich people, but understand that that's how an economy works. Yeah. Watch China in the next 2-3 years. What this latest decision to start mingling with private sector business, what the result of that will be. And that's exactly what we see here.
Yeah. Eben, is it possible to have true economic transformation without some sectors of the society giving up something for the others to gain something?
Define giving up. Give up what?
Well, like you said, the issue of the Chinese government encroaching, or the 25% that was so controversial. How do you go about this?
Our society, the private sector in our country has grown tremendously in terms of understanding what our social problems are. So you have very few medium to larger size private sector entities that voluntary for many years already provided education, financial assistance, ownership to previously disadvantaged people, because their sustainability is dependent on the social structures in our society. Yeah. So the moment you say, but you have to do that, you kill those initiatives as well, because a lot of people say, well, if I'm forced to do this, I have a different view on empowering people. Yeah. So giving up, there's been a lot of sacrifices made by private sector, which unfortunately is not always, it's not popular for government to preach that, because then government kind of nullifies its own its own position and its own election promises. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, Eben, what do you think? What are the stumbling blocks that 31 years after independence, we're still on this topic of economic transformation? I know you touched on it in your report of the association. Maybe can you just give us a brief summary, just for the benefit of the viewers?
Yeah. Look, every country struggles with it, to some extent. The debate on poverty hasn't gone away in the so-called rich countries. It's always a debate, and it will always be there, and you will never eradicate poverty. Don't dream of that. It has never been eradicated anywhere in the world. Inequality is a problem. But what is inequality? Inequality means that a small portion of society is far richer than the broader portion of society. So by taking away the small portion of the richer people means nothing for the rest. You have to broaden your economy. You have to grow the cake. The principle of there's a cake and it's only that big, and you own 75% of it, and we're going to cut it up for the rest of the people. That doesn't grow an economy, and it ultimately depletes an economy and makes it go bankrupt. We're pretty much where we are now, because we have gone way above our sustainable level of debt relative to what we can produce. So that's ultimately the outcome of that. Nobody's going to benefit from that. So you have to find means to grow the cake. Your 75% may be this big, but if the economy grows, you might become far bigger, richer, but other people will grow in the meantime. And again, I come back to the recipe that has been proven and tested. It takes time to grow an economy, to put the enabling environment there for an economy, but also to do investment, proper investment, responsible investment in your human development, your schooling, your healthcare, and your safety in housing and so forth.
Yeah.
We did very poorly on that. So that's why we still have the debate. Our economy is doing worse than it did before independence. Simply because we've put policies in place and a massive bureaucratic system in place and many rules and the cost of compliance. So we did things that actively started breaking down our economy. You cannot achieve anything like in that methodology. So we will continue to have this debate. We will sit in this chair with either this document or another one promised by either the current government or the next one, because it's not going to stop with this one.
Yeah.
Telling people, you are poor, we will come to your rescue as a government, and to do that, we will make laws that will benefit you.
Yeah.
But if they're not practically workable, if they have very predictable results of going in, taking things into the opposite direction, we will forever have this debate.
Yeah. Is there an umbilical cord between government and the private sector as far as moving forward cohesively is concerned?
No.
Do you
very
engage,
little.
Do you guys engage?
It's this thin. No.
Why is that?
It's well, it originated with a trust deficit many years back. It's amplified by government rhetoric of the haves and the haves not, and we are here for the have not. If there were more rich people than poor people in Namibia, I promise you, government would have been on the side of the rich people. Because it's about power and votes, is it not?
Yeah.
That's what politicians do. And no offense towards them, that's what every politician everywhere in the world does. All right? So there's a trust deficit which in many ways has been amplified by government, by the rhetoric of government and the narrative of your poverty is somebody else's fault, and we will come and rectify it for you, but just trust us by giving us your vote. And over time, I think we're getting closer than we were many years back. We are getting closer. The entities being established and the structures being established to talk about these things, you can see is becoming more and more efficient and so forth. But politics still rules the roost. And if I don't like a politician, I'm just a normal person. Yeah. But if a politician doesn't like you, you're excluded from the debate and the discussion. And we've seen that criticism is frowned upon. So if you criticize, you're kind of part of the enemy side, and we're not going to deal with you then. Which is bad, because if you don't have an open critical debate on these things, you don't get a common vision, you don't have a shared motive and a shared goal, and most importantly, a process of reaching those destinations, then there will be always a bit of a loggerheads, and the guys that from private sector, call it now private sector, that do get drawn into the policy making frame are the extremely silent people that will never in public space provide a document like this and say, but just on a logical level we have a problem with this, and that's wrong. So we kill the public debate, and distrust follows from both sides, obviously, from both sides. And hopefully that will change in future, hopefully. Yeah.
So just as we sum up, what is the way forward regarding this topic? What is the way forward, a sustainable way forward?
Well, you see now this thing has been referred back to the Prime Minister, okay? And this is now how many times that this has happened? And our investment board came out with an opinion that this needs to be reworked, and we obviously agree that there's a lot of things there that's definitely killing investment and has been killing investment for 5 years, because the direction was already pointed. Yeah. Government said we're going that way, and investors said, well, we don't want to go that way, so we will go this way. But we are back at square one, where we say, okay, we'll relook at it. We'll have another look. We'll see how we can refine it. So the direction is now blurry, but it's still very generally in that direction. Yeah. We need to go to the drawing board and ask ourselves, what is that age-old recipe that worked for countries that brought a substantial amount of people out of poverty? It's there. if you want to listen, it's there. It's a free market, open, democratic society based on the principles of the rule of law to attract investors. If you look at photos of Dubai 30, 40 years back, you will be shocked to see what it looked like there. And Dubai just opened its economy. It had, for long, had no taxes. It could afford that. We can't go that route. I'm not saying we should. Yeah. But it made investment attractive. And Dubai brought poor people to riches very quickly because of an attractive investment environment. It can actually be done in a short time, but we have to follow the recipe. What we did now is we read the recipe and say we will do exactly the opposite of that. Recipe for the disaster then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eben, thank you very much for coming.
Yes, it's always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good.